There are moments when the entire room goes silent and reality shifts so dramatically that everyone present knows they'll remember it forever. For the guests at Macau's most exclusive underground Mafia gathering, the annual Triad Summit held in a casino penthouse where Asia's most dangerous criminal organizations negotiated territory and settled disputes. That moment happened when Jae-ho Shik, head of Seoul's most feared organized crime family, walked across a ballroom floor crowded with killers and kingpins, dropped to one knee in front of a woman everyone assumed was a servant, and said 5 words that shattered every assumption in the room. "My queen. I've found you." The woman he knelt before was Halifa Reynolds. 30 years old, dark skin that glowed against the simple black Maid uniform she wore, natural hair pulled back in a practical bun, holding a tray of champagne glasses like she'd been serving drinks all evening. Everyone had been laughing at her 30 seconds earlier. Mocking the help who'd somehow wandered into a space reserved for criminals who controlled billions in illegal enterprises. Some drunk Russian mobster had actually thrown his drink at her, soaking her uniform, while the room erupted in cruel laughter at her expense. Then Jae-ho Shik, the ghost of Seoul, the man whose criminal empire spanned 3 continents, whose reputation for strategic brilliance and absolute ruthlessness made other mob bosses nervous, had pushed through the crowd like they didn't exist, knelt before her with reverence that looked like worship, and called her queen. The laughter died instantly. Because Jae-ho Shik didn't kneel. For anyone. Ever. But let me start at the beginning, because this story isn't what you think it's about. This is about power, about the difference between what people see and what actually is, and about a woman who'd spent 5 years pretending to be invisible while building an empire that would make every person in that ballroom irrelevant. Halifa Reynolds was born in Detroit to a mother who cleaned houses and a father who worked 3 jobs to keep the family housed and fed. She'd grown up poor but not broken, smart but underestimated, watching how power actually worked in America, not through official channels or legal structures, but through money, connections, and the willingness to do what others wouldn't. She'd put herself through community college, then university, studying finance and international business while working as a hotel housekeeper, a restaurant server, a nanny for wealthy families. Always watching, always learning, always understanding that the people with actual power rarely looked like they had power. Rich people talked freely in front of service workers. Discussed business deals, illegal activities, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities, all while assuming the woman cleaning their toilet or serving their dinner was too stupid or too powerless to use the information. Halifa had spent 10 years collecting that information. Building dossiers on powerful people, documenting their crimes and secrets, creating leverage that could be deployed strategically. Then she'd done something unprecedented, she'd used that leverage to build her own criminal empire. Not through violence or territory control like traditional organized crime. Through information brokerage, strategic blackmail, and positioning herself as the person who knew everyone's secrets and could be trusted to keep them, for a price. By age 27, Halifa controlled one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks in the global criminal underworld. She knew which politicians were taking bribes, which corporate executives were embezzling, which mob bosses were planning betrayals, which law enforcement officials could be bought. She traded in secrets the way other criminals traded in drugs or weapons, and she'd become extraordinarily wealthy and powerful doing it. But she'd done it all while maintaining the perfect disguise. She looked like a nobody. A service worker. A woman so beneath notice that powerful people forgot she existed even while she was in the room with them. She dressed in simple clothes purchased from discount stores. Lived in a modest apartment. Worked part-time jobs as a maid and caterer to maintain her cover and her access to the spaces where powerful people revealed their secrets. To the world, she was invisible. Powerless. Exactly the kind of person wealthy criminals would mock and dismiss. In reality, she controlled information that could destroy half the people in any room she entered. And she'd come to Macau's Triad Summit, disguised as part of the catering staff, because she'd learned that someone in that ballroom was planning something that would destabilize her carefully constructed intelligence network. She just needed to identify who before they made their move. Then Jae-ho Shik had complicated everything by recognizing her. Jae-ho was 35 years old and had inherited his criminal empire at 28 when his father was murdered by rivals who thought the son would be easier to control than the father. They'd been catastrophically wrong about that. Within 6 months, Jae-ho had eliminated every person involved in his father's murder. Within a year, he'd doubled his organization's territory. Within 3 years, he'd become the dominant Korean organized crime presence across Asia, with operations spanning from Seoul to Singapore, from Tokyo to Mumbai. He was brilliant in ways that transcended conventional criminal intelligence. He understood systems, patterns, human psychology. Could predict how rivals would move 3 steps ahead. Could identify weaknesses in organizations that seemed impenetrable. Could turn enemies into allies and allies into weapons with equal facility. He was also completely ruthless. Not cruel for cruelty's sake, but absolutely willing to do whatever was necessary to protect his empire and advance his interests. He'd ordered hundreds of deaths, destroyed dozens of rival organizations, built his reputation on the understanding that crossing Jae-ho-shik meant accepting consequences that were both inevitable and catastrophic. But he had one vulnerability that he'd never been able to eliminate: he was searching for someone. 5 years ago, someone had saved his life in ways he still didn't completely understand. He'd been in New York on business, had walked into what he'd thought was a legitimate meeting, had realized too late it was an ambush orchestrated by rivals who wanted him dead. He should have died that night. Would have died, except someone had warned him. A woman he'd never met, who'd called his phone from a blocked number, who'd given him specific details about the ambush. Who'd be there, what weapons they'd have, exactly how the trap was structured. He'd escaped because of that information. Had survived, turned the ambush back on his attackers, eliminated the rivals who thought they could kill him. But he'd never learned who the woman was. Had spent 5 years trying to find her, trying to understand how she'd known about the ambush, trying to locate the person who'd saved his life. All he had was a voice. A voice with an American accent, calm and confident, giving him information that should have been impossible for anyone outside his organization to possess. And tonight, in a Macau ballroom, he'd heard that voice again. The woman in the maid's uniform had said exactly 3 words to another server: "Excuse me, please," but it had been enough. Jae-ho's recognition had been instant and absolute. 5 years of searching, and he'd found her serving champagne at a criminal summit. So he'd crossed the ballroom floor, pushed through the crowd of confused mobsters, and knelt before the woman who'd saved his life. "My queen," he'd said, using the only name he had for her, the code name she'd used during that phone call 5 years ago. "I've found you." And the entire ballroom had gone silent. Halifa looked down at Jae-ho-shik kneeling in front of her, at the 100 most dangerous criminals in Asia staring in shock, at her carefully maintained cover completely destroyed, and made a split-second decision about how to handle this. She could deny it. Pretend she didn't know what he was talking about. Try to maintain her disguise. Or she could own it. Use his recognition to establish dominance. Turn a moment of exposure into an opportunity for power. She set down her tray of champagne glasses with deliberate calm. Pulled off the cheap maid's cap she'd been wearing. Let her natural hair fall free. And when she spoke, her voice carried across the silent ballroom with authority that made hardened criminals take involuntary steps backward. "Stand up, Jae-ho-shik. You kneel to no one. Not even me." He stood, his eyes never leaving her face, looking at her like she was the only person in the universe. "You saved my life 5 years ago in New York. I've been searching for you ever since. I know. I've been watching you search. Watching you build your empire, eliminate your enemies, become exactly what I predicted you'd become." Halifa smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. "I save people who are worth saving. You've proven the investment was justified." The ballroom was still completely silent. Every criminal present was recalculating, reassessing, trying to understand what was happening. The woman they'd been mocking was someone Jae-ho-shik treated with reverence. Someone he called queen. Someone who apparently had intelligence capabilities that extended across continents and time spans. Someone who was absolutely not a powerless maid. Halifa turned to address the room, her voice calm but carrying authority that came from actual power rather than performed dominance. "My name is Halifa Reynolds. Some of you know me by reputation, though not by face. I'm the one who told the Yakuza about the Hong Kong Triad's planned betrayal last year. I'm the one who warned the Mexican cartels about DEA's Operation Jade Dragon. I'm the one who's been selling you information, keeping your secrets, and occasionally saving your lives for the past 5 years. She paused, let that sink in. I'm the queen. And I've been in this room all evening, listening to you discuss business, watching you reveal weaknesses, collecting information that some of you would pay millions to keep private. The Russian mobster who'd thrown his drink at her went pale. Several other criminals looked like they might be sick. But I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here because someone in this room is planning something that threatens my network. And I'm going to find out who before I leave tonight. She looked at Jae-ho, then back at the crowd. So I suggest everyone behave themselves. Because the ghost of Seoul and the queen are having a conversation, and interrupting us would be extremely unwise. Then she took Jae-ho's arm like they were at a society ball instead of a criminal summit, and walked with him out of the ballroom and onto the penthouse terrace where they could talk privately. Behind them, the criminals in the ballroom started panicking about exactly what secrets they'd discussed in front of the help over the past several hours. On the terrace, Halifa and Jae-ho faced each other properly for the first time. You really spent 5 years looking for me? She asked. Every day. You saved my life and then disappeared. I needed to know who you were. Needed to thank you. Needed to understand how you'd known about the ambush. I know everything, Jae-ho. That's my business. Information. Secrets. The things people don't want revealed. She leaned against the terrace railing. I knew about the ambush because I had informants in the organization that planned it. I warned you because killing you would have destabilized the Korean underworld in ways that would have been bad for my business. So it was purely transactional. Everything I do is transactional. That's how you survive in this world without an army or territory or the protection of a traditional organization. Then why reveal yourself now? You could have denied knowing me, maintained your cover, continued operating invisibly. Halifa smiled. Because you were going to keep looking, and eventually you'd have found me anyway. Better to control the revelation than let you expose me accidentally. Plus, your recognition gave me instant credibility with every criminal in that ballroom. They all saw the ghost of Seoul kneel to me. That's worth more than invisibility. She turned to face him directly. But I meant what I said. Someone in that summit is planning something against me. I need to find out who and neutralize the threat. Will you help me? Yes. Without question or hesitation. You saved my life. I owe you everything. You owe me a favor. That's different from everything. To me it's the same. Jae-ho moved closer. I built my empire on loyalty and debt repayment. You gave me my life. Whatever you need, it's yours. Halifa studied him carefully. Jae-ho Shik was dangerous, brilliant, ruthless, completely committed to whatever he decided mattered. Having him as an ally could be incredibly useful. Having him as an enemy would be catastrophic. Then help me identify who's planning against me. Use your organization's intelligence capabilities, your understanding of criminal networks. Help me figure out which of those people in there wants me destroyed. Done. But Halifa, he paused. Why do you do this? You're brilliant enough to succeed legitimately. Why choose the criminal underworld? Because legitimate success requires playing by rules designed to keep people like me powerless. I'm a black woman from Detroit with no family money, no connections, no advantages except intelligence. The legal world would have ground me down and exploited me. The criminal world lets me use my advantages without caring about my disadvantages. She smiled. Plus, I like power. And this is the fastest way to get it when you start from nothing. Fair answer. Jae-ho extended his hand. Partners, then. Your intelligence and my resources. We find who's targeting you and we eliminate the threat. Halifa shook his hand. Partners. But understand something, I don't take orders. This is collaboration between equals, not you protecting me or directing me. Clear? Completely clear. I wouldn't want to work with you any other way. And just like that, in a Macau penthouse overlooking the South China Sea, Two of the most dangerous people in the criminal underworld formed an alliance that would reshape organized crime across 3 continents. But first, they had to survive the night. Because in the ballroom behind them, someone who'd been exposed in Khalifa's presence was making plans to ensure she didn't leave Macau alive. Subscribe to see what happens when the invisible woman everyone underestimated reveals she's been the most powerful person in the room all along. Comment where you're watching from, and tell me, have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? This story is just beginning. The Triad Summit continued in the ballroom, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Where before there had been relaxed confidence, criminals who controlled territories and commanded armies feeling secure in their power, now there was paranoia. Everyone was remembering what they'd said in front of the help over the past several hours. Discussing illegal operations, admitting to crimes, revealing weaknesses in their organizations. All while Khalifa Reynolds had been serving champagne and listening. "We have a problem," Dmitry Volkov, the Russian mobster who'd thrown his drink at her, said to his lieutenants. They'd retreated to a corner of the ballroom, speaking in low Russian that they assumed no one else would understand. What they didn't know was that Khalifa had planted listening devices on 3 of Dmitry's people earlier in the evening, and those devices were transmitting directly to equipment she'd hidden in a maintenance closet. On the terrace, Khalifa pulled out her phone, not the cheap model a maid would carry, but a sophisticated encrypted device, and activated the audio feed. "Listen," she told Jeho, pulling up the Russian conversation with real-time translation. Dmitry's panicking. Jeho listened to the Russians discussing how Khalifa had heard them talking about their plan to expand into Korean territory, about bribes they'd paid to Chinese officials, about a shipment of weapons they'd smuggled through Seoul. "He's not your threat," Jeho said. "He's just scared you'll sell his secrets to rivals. But he's not sophisticated enough to have been planning against you specifically." Agreed. "He's a blunt instrument. Dangerous but predictable." Khalifa scrolled through other audio feeds. "Let's check the Yakuza leadership. They've been quiet all evening, which is suspicious." She pulled up another feed. The Yakuza representatives were speaking in Japanese, discussing something about the information broker and removing the risk. Jeho's expression darkened. "They're talking about killing you. They think you know too much about their operations to be allowed to continue." "They're not wrong. I know exactly how much they've been skimming from their Chinese partners. But they're also not the main threat." Khalifa kept scrolling. "They'd try to kill me, but they wouldn't have a sophisticated plan. They'd just send assassins and hope for the best." "Then who? Who in that room is sophisticated enough to threaten you?" Khalifa thought about the guest list. The Triad Summit brought together representatives from every major Asian criminal organization plus connections to European and American groups. Hundreds of billions in criminal enterprise represented in one ballroom. "Someone who understands information warfare," she said. "Someone who knows that killing me would just make my network's information public through deadman switches I've established. Someone who tried to dismantle my network systematically rather than just eliminate me." She pulled up her master file, dossiers on every major player at the summit. Scrolled through, looking for someone with the right combination of intelligence, resources, and motivation. Then she stopped at one profile. "Marcus Chen," she said, showing Jeho the file. "Taiwanese, runs intelligence operations for the Sunyeon Triad. Former military intelligence before he went criminal. Brilliant strategist, understands information control, has been expanding his own intelligence network for the past 2 years. And he'd see you as competition." "Exactly. He's trying to build what I've already built. If he could eliminate me and absorb my network, he'd instantly become the most valuable intelligence asset in the Asian underworld." Jeho studied the file. "How do we confirm he's the threat?" "We make him reveal himself. Create a situation where he has to act or lose his opportunity." Khalifa pulled up a sophisticated app on her phone, her network's central hub, containing years of collected intelligence on thousands of people. She selected a specific file, one containing devastating information about Sun Yeon's operations, and initiated a timer. "I'm setting this to auto-publish in 90 minutes unless I personally cancel it." The file contains evidence that Sun Yeon has been embezzling from their own organization, that Marcus personally has stolen approximately $40 million over the past 3 years. He'll be killed by his own people if that publishes. Exactly. So now he has 90 minutes to stop me. If he's the threat, he'll make a move. If he's not, nothing happens and I cancel the timer. Jae-ho smiled. It was predatory. You're using yourself as bait. I'm creating a pressure situation that forces my enemy to reveal themselves. There's a difference. And if he tries to kill you? Then you and I kill him first. That's why I have a partner now. They went back into the ballroom together. Halifa had shed the maid's uniform, cleaned up in a private bathroom, and now wore a simple but elegant black dress she'd had hidden with her real clothes. With her natural hair loose and her posture radiating confidence instead of subservience, she looked like a completely different person. The room went quiet when she entered. Every criminal present was reassessing, calculating, trying to figure out how to handle the woman they'd dismissed as help but who was apparently one of the most powerful information brokers in the criminal underworld. Halifa walked directly to Marcus Chen, who was standing with other Sunyeon leadership, and smiled. Marcus. We need to talk. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes showed calculation. Miss Reynolds. I wasn't aware you'd be attending the summit. I'm always attending. Just usually invisibly. She gestured toward a private meeting room off the main ballroom. Shall we discuss business? I have a proposition that might interest you. Marcus looked at his colleagues, then at Jae-ho standing protectively behind Halifa, then back at Halifa herself. Of course. I'm always interested in business opportunities. They entered the private meeting room, Halifa, Marcus, Jae-ho, and 2 of Marcus's bodyguards. The room was designed for negotiation, soundproof, no windows, comfortable furniture arranged to facilitate conversation. It was also completely wired with Halifa's surveillance equipment from an earlier visit she'd made to the casino. I'll be direct, Halifa said once they were seated. You've been trying to build an intelligence network that competes with mine. You've recruited some of my contacts, tried to replicate my information gathering methods, positioned yourself as an alternative to my services. Marcus's expression didn't change. Competition is normal in business. Competition is fine. Attempting to destroy my network and absorb my operations is not. She pulled out her phone, showed him the file she'd set to auto-publish. I know you've been embezzling from Sunyeon. 40 million over 3 years, hidden through shell companies and falsified accounting. I know because 3 of your accountants sell me information. His face went pale. You're blackmailing me. I'm establishing boundaries. You can compete with me legitimately. But if you try to eliminate me or dismantle my network, this file publishes and your own organization kills you for theft. Clear? Very clear. Marcus's voice was tight. What do you want? I want to know if you're the one who's been planning to move against me systematically. If you're the threat I came to Macau to identify. And if I admit I was planning against you? Then we negotiate a settlement where you stop and I don't destroy you. Because I prefer valuable enemies who know their boundaries to eliminated enemies who can't provide future utility. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly calculating options. Yes, he said finally. I was planning against you. Not to kill you, I'm not stupid enough to think that would work given your dead man switches. But to systematically undermine your network. Recruit your contacts, offer better rates, create alternative intelligence sources that would make you irrelevant. Why? Because you're black and American and you've built something in our territory that should belong to Asian organizations. Because your success is embarrassing to people who think they should be dominant. Because. He paused. Because you're brilliant and I wanted what you'd built. At least you're honest. Halifa leaned back. Here's my counteroffer. You stop planning against me. You acknowledge my network is superior and refer clients to me when you can't serve them yourself. In exchange, I share intelligence that benefits Sunyeon, I don't publish your embezzlement evidence, and I consider you a valued partner rather than a threat to eliminate. You're offering partnership after I just admitted planning to destroy you? I'm offering practical arrangement that benefits both of us. You get to live, keep your position, and profit from my network. I get to stop worrying about you as a threat and gain a useful ally in Taiwan. Marcus looked at his bodyguards, then at Jae-ho, then back at Halifa. You're either crazy or the most brilliant strategist I've ever met. Both. Do we have a deal? He extended his hand. We have a deal. I stop planning against you, acknowledge your dominance, refer clients. You share beneficial intelligence and don't expose my embezzlement. Halifa shook his hand. Excellent. I'll send you the contract terms tomorrow. Violate them and the embezzlement file publishes immediately. Honor them and we'll both profit. She stood to leave. Oh, and Marcus? Thank you for being honest about your motivations. Most people aren't brave enough to admit they resent my success because of my race and nationality. Your honesty makes you more trustworthy than people who pretend they're not prejudiced. They left the meeting room. Marcus looked shaken but relieved. Halifa had just turned a serious threat into a reluctant ally through strategic blackmail and pragmatic negotiation. That was impressive, Jae-ho said once they were back on the terrace. You identified the threat, confronted him, and converted him to partnership in under 20 minutes. That's how you survive when you don't have an army. You make enemies more valuable as allies than as corpses. Halifa cancelled the auto-publish timer on her phone. Though I would have destroyed him if he'd refused the deal. I know. That's why it worked. He believed you'd follow through. They stood on the terrace, looking out at Macau's glittering skyline, the city that had been built on gambling and organized crime, where fortunes changed hands every night and power was always being renegotiated. What happens now? Jae-ho asked. You've secured your network, eliminated the immediate threat. Do you disappear back into invisibility? I can't. Not after tonight. Everyone in that ballroom knows who I am now. The disguise is burned. Halifa turned to face him. I'm going to have to operate openly going forward. Build security, establish visible presence, actually defend my empire instead of hiding behind anonymity. That's dangerous. It's necessary. My old model worked when I was invisible. Now I need a new model. She paused. Which is where you come in. You offered to help. I'm taking you up on that offer. I need security, operational support, someone who understands criminal dynamics and can help me transition from invisible broker to visible power player. You're asking me to work with you. Formally. I'm proposing a partnership. My intelligence and information network combined with your security and organizational infrastructure. We'd be unstoppable. Jae-ho considered this. His organization was powerful but sometimes lacked the sophisticated intelligence that made strategic decisions possible. Halifa's network provided exactly that capability. What are the terms? Equal partnership. We share intelligence, resources, and decision-making. Neither of us has authority over the other. We consult, collaborate, build something together that's stronger than what either of us could build alone. And personally? Jae-ho asked, his voice quiet. This partnership. Is it purely business? Halifa looked at him carefully. Jae-ho Shik was dangerous, brilliant, and absolutely committed to whatever he decided mattered. Getting personally involved with him would complicate everything. But she'd also spent 5 years watching him build his empire, admiring his strategic thinking, recognizing in him the kind of disciplined intelligence that matched her own. Ask me that question in 6 months, she said. After we've worked together, after we know if this partnership actually functions. Right now, we barely know each other beyond reputation and one phone call 5 years ago. Fair. But I'm asking again in 6 months. I'll look forward to it. They returned to the summit ballroom one more time. Halifa walked to the center of the room and addressed the assembled criminals with authority that came from actual power rather than performed dominance. I'm Halifa Reynolds. The Queen. I run the most sophisticated intelligence network in the criminal underworld. If you need information, if you want to buy or sell secrets, if you're looking for strategic intelligence, you come to me. My prices are non-negotiable. My discretion is absolute. And my reach is comprehensive. She paused, let that sink in. I know all of your secrets. Every weakness, every crime, every vulnerability. I could destroy most of you with a single phone call or data publication. But I don't, because you're more valuable as clients than as targets. Her voice hardened. But if you come against me, if you threaten my network or my people, I will end you with information warfare that makes traditional violence look gentle. Am I clear? The ballroom was silent. Then, slowly, people started nodding. Acknowledging her dominance. Accepting that the woman they'd mocked as a maid was actually one of the most powerful people in the room. Dmitry Volkov, the Russian who'd thrown his drink at her, approached slowly, clearly nervous. Miss Reynolds, I apologize for my disrespect earlier. I didn't know. You didn't know, so you thought you could be cruel to someone you perceived as powerless. That tells me everything about your character. Halifa's voice was cold. But I'm pragmatic. You can make this right by paying triple rates for any intelligence you purchase from my network for the next year. Consider it an asshole tax. Done. Absolutely. Whatever you require. Good. Now get out of my sight before I decide permanent consequences are more appropriate. He fled. Other criminals approached more cautiously, offering apologies, requesting to establish business relationships, clearly understanding that Halifa was someone whose favor was valuable and whose enmity was catastrophic. By the end of the evening, Halifa had established 15 new client relationships, set premium pricing for her intelligence services, and positioned herself as an openly powerful player in the Asian criminal underworld. Everything had changed. The invisible woman had become visible, and that visibility came with power she'd never accessed while hiding. As the summit ended and criminals departed for their respective territories, Halifa and Jaeho stood on the terrace one more time. You did it, Jaeho said. Transformed exposure into dominance. Turned a burned cover into expanded power. I did. But I couldn't have done it without your recognition giving me credibility. Thank you for kneeling. For calling me queen. For making everyone in that room take me seriously. I meant every word. You saved my life. That makes you royalty in my world. Halifa smiled. Then I guess we're partners, Ghost of Seoul. Your empire and mine, working together. Partners. And in 6 months, I'm asking that personal question again. I'll be ready with an answer. They left Macau together, heading to separate cities but connected by an alliance that would reshape the criminal underworld in ways neither of them fully understood yet. The invisible woman had revealed herself. And the world would never be the same. The 6 months following the Macau summit transformed both Halifa's operation and her partnership with Jaeho in ways neither had anticipated. Halifa established a visible headquarters, a sophisticated office complex in Singapore, carefully designed to look like a legitimate data analytics firm. She hired security, administrative staff, analysts. Built infrastructure that could support her intelligence network operating openly rather than through hidden channels. She also had to adapt her methods. When she'd been invisible, she could gather intelligence through service work, plant bugs in private spaces, exploit her anonymity. Now that everyone knew who she was, those tactics didn't work. She needed new approaches. That's where Jaeho's organization proved invaluable. His network provided muscle that protected her operations. His technology teams helped her develop sophisticated surveillance capabilities that didn't require physical presence. His connections throughout the Asian underworld gave her access to information sources she'd struggled to cultivate as an independent operator. In exchange, Halifa's intelligence transformed Jaeho's strategic decision-making. She provided advance warning about rival movements, detailed dossiers on potential allies and enemies, market intelligence about opportunities in legitimate business that could launder criminal profits. They spoke daily. Video calls, encrypted messages, occasional in-person meetings in Hong Kong or Bangkok or other neutral cities. The partnership was working better than either had expected. But it was also revealing personal dynamics that complicated the purely professional relationship they'd intended. You're micromanaging again, Halifa said during one video call, her voice sharp. I don't need you to approve every intelligence gathering operation. That's my domain. I'm not micromanaging. I'm providing security consultation because your operations have gotten riskier since you went public. Jae-ho was equally sharp. You can't just walk into Yakuza territory with a wire and assume they won't search you. I've been doing this for 10 years. I know how to assess risks. You've been doing this invisibly for 10 years. Operating openly requires different security protocols. They argued like this constantly. Both brilliant, both stubborn, both absolutely convinced they knew best in their respective areas of expertise. It was frustrating and stimulating in equal measure. You're both idiots, Mei-lin, Jae-ho's head of operations, said during one meeting where Halifa and Jae-ho had argued for 30 minutes about a surveillance approach. You argue because you respect each other enough to actually engage instead of just deferring. But you need to learn to compromise instead of always trying to win. I don't defer, Halifa and Jae-ho said simultaneously. Mei-lin laughed. I can see that. But you're partners. Act like it. The breakthrough came 3 months into their partnership when they faced their first serious joint crisis. One of Halifa's intelligence sources, a banker who provided information about money laundering operations, was arrested by Hong Kong police. And in his possession were encrypted files that, if decrypted, would expose dozens of Halifa's clients and compromise her entire network. We have 72 hours before Hong Kong police crack the encryption, Halifa said during an emergency meeting in Jae-ho's Seoul office. If those files become public, my clients get exposed, my reputation gets destroyed, and my network collapses. Can you retrieve the files? Jae-ho asked. Not legally. They're being held in police evidence storage, which is heavily secured. I'd need someone with serious capabilities to extract them. Which I have. Jae-ho pulled up building plans for the police headquarters on his computer. My organization has run operations against Hong Kong police before. We can extract the files. But it's high risk. How high? If we're caught, it's an international incident. Hong Kong police would escalate to Chinese government involvement. My entire Hong Kong operation would be compromised. So you'd be risking your empire to save mine? Yes. Because that's what partners do. Halifa felt something shift in her chest. Jae-ho wasn't just offering tactical support. He was putting his own operations at risk to protect hers. Why? She asked. We've only been partners for 3 months. Our arrangement is new, untested. Why risk so much? Because you saved my life 5 years ago. Because this partnership has already proven more valuable than anything else I built. Because. He paused. Because I've spent 3 months working with you, arguing with you, watching you operate. And I've concluded that your success matters more to me than risk avoidance. That's not a business rationale. No. It's not. They looked at each other across the desk, the professional distance they'd been maintaining suddenly feeling like performance rather than protection. We'll discuss the personal implications later, Halifa said, her voice not quite steady. Right now, we need to plan a police headquarters infiltration. Can your team actually do this? Yes. But I'm running the operation personally. Too important to delegate. Then I'm coming with you. It's my network, my files. I'm not sitting in safety while you risk yourself. Halifa, you're not a field operative. I've been gathering intelligence in dangerous situations for 10 years. I can handle myself. And this is non-negotiable. We're partners. We take the risks together. Jae-ho smiled. You're stubborn. You're controlling. We'll work on both issues after we survive this operation. They spent 48 hours planning the most sophisticated operation either had ever attempted. Jae-ho's security team provided tactical expertise. Halifa's intelligence provided details about police procedures, security weaknesses, evidence storage protocols. The operation began at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. Jae-ho and Halifa, along with 6 of his best operatives, infiltrated Hong Kong police headquarters through a maintenance entrance that Halifa's intelligence had identified as vulnerable. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. moving through darkened corridors, avoiding security patrols, using sophisticated electronic countermeasures to bypass alarm systems. Halifa had never done anything like this. All her intelligence work had been subtle, invisible, non-violent. This was direct action, the kind of operation that could end with gunfights or arrests or death. But she trusted Jae-ho. Trusted his tactical planning, his team's competence, his absolute commitment to succeeding without unnecessary violence. They reached the evidence storage area. Halifa worked on the digital locks while Jae-ho's team secured the perimeter. Her hands were shaking, from adrenaline, from fear, from the reality that if she failed, both their organizations would be destroyed. "You can do this," Jae-ho said quietly beside her. "You're brilliant. You've solved harder problems than electronic locks. Those problems didn't come with immediate life-threatening consequences. Then it's good you're not working alone." She got the lock open. They entered evidence storage, located the files, copied everything to encrypted drives, and wiped the originals to make recovery impossible. Then alarms started blaring. "We're compromised," one of Jae-ho's operatives said. Multiple police units responding. Estimate 3 minutes to contact. "Evacuation route beta," Jae-ho commanded. "Move now." They ran. Through corridors, down stairwells, Jae-ho's team using smoke grenades and flashbangs to cover their escape without lethal force. Halifa kept pace, her heart hammering, trusting that Jae-ho's planning would get them out. They made it to the extraction point with 30 seconds to spare. Vehicles waiting, drivers ready, smooth transition from infiltration to escape. By the time Hong Kong police locked down the area, Jae-ho and Halifa were across the border in Shenzhen, safe in a secure location, holding encrypted drives that contained her entire network's preservation. "We did it," Halifa said, still catching her breath, adrenaline making her hands shake. "You did it. The lock breaking, the file location, the intelligence that made this possible, that was all you." Jae-ho was also breathing hard, coming down from the operational high. "I just provided the tactical support. You risked your organization for mine. That's more than tactical support." They were alone in a hotel suite, Jae-ho's team securing the perimeter outside. The danger had passed, but the adrenaline was still flooding both their systems. "Halifa," Jae-ho said, his voice serious. "I need to tell you something. If this is the personal question you promised to ask after 6 months. It's 3 months. I can't wait." He moved closer. "I'm falling for you. Probably fell for you during our first conversation 5 years ago when you saved my life with information you shouldn't have had. Definitely fell harder during these 3 months of partnership. And tonight, watching you work that lock while police were closing in, trusting me to keep you safe while you saved your network, I realized I'm completely in love with you." Halifa felt her heart stop, then restart with painful intensity. "That's extremely inconvenient," she said, her voice shaky. "I know. We're business partners. Getting personally involved complicates everything. It makes us vulnerable to each other. Creates emotional leverage that could be exploited. Yes. Makes strategic decision-making more difficult if personal feelings interfere with operational planning. Absolutely. So we should probably not pursue this. Should maintain professional boundaries, keep the partnership purely business. Probably." They looked at each other. The distance between them was less than a foot. The air felt charged. "I'm in love with you too," Halifa said. "Have been since you knelt in that ballroom and called me queen. Maybe before that, when I spent 5 years watching you build your empire and admiring your strategic thinking. Tonight just made it impossible to keep denying. So what do? We acknowledge that this is happening. We agree that personal and professional are going to be complicated and messy, and we'll have to actively work to keep them balanced. And then we see if we can actually build something beyond just business partnership." Jae-ho kissed her. Halifa kissed him back. And in a Shenzhen hotel room, after successfully infiltrating Hong Kong police headquarters and narrowly escaping capture, 2 of the most dangerous people in the Asian criminal underworld started something that was definitely going to complicate everything. When they broke apart, both breathing hard for different reasons now, Halifa laughed. We're terrible at this. At being normal. At separating professional from personal. We're criminals who run international illegal enterprises. Normal was never an option. Jae-ho pulled her closer. But we can try. Be partners in business and partners in life. Figure out how to balance both. It's going to be a disaster. Probably. But an interesting disaster. I wouldn't have it any other way. The personal relationship transformed their professional partnership in unexpected ways. They were more effective because they trusted each other completely. Halifa could focus on intelligence knowing Jae-ho's security would protect her. Jae-ho could make strategic decisions knowing Halifa's information was absolutely reliable. They complemented each other's weaknesses and amplified each other's strengths. But they also fought more intensely because personal stakes made professional disagreements feel more significant. You can't just decide to expand into Indonesian territory without consulting me, Halifa said during one argument, her voice sharp. I'm your partner. That means discussing major strategic decisions before making them. The opportunity had a time limit. I needed to move fast or lose the advantage. Consulting you would have taken time I didn't have. Jae-ho was equally sharp. Then your operational planning is flawed if it doesn't build in time for partner consultation. What if I'd had intelligence suggesting Indonesia was a trap? What if there were complications you couldn't see? I assessed the risks. Made an informed decision. You don't get to veto my every move. I'm not asking for veto power. I'm asking for the basic respect of being consulted before you make decisions that affect both our organizations. They were in Halifa's Singapore office, the argument escalating in ways that had nothing to do with Indonesia and everything to do with control and trust and the difficulty of balancing equal partnership when both people were accustomed to absolute authority. You're right, Jae-ho said finally, his voice losing its edge. I should have consulted you. I made a mistake assuming speed mattered more than collaboration. Halifa blinked. She'd been prepared to keep fighting, hadn't expected capitulation. You're agreeing with me? Yes. Because you're right. And because being right matters more than protecting my ego. He moved closer. I'm sorry. I'll do better about consultation before major decisions. I'm sorry too. For implying you're incapable of assessing risks. You've survived in this world longer than I have. You clearly know what you're doing. But I'm stronger with your intelligence informing my decisions. That's why we're partners. They kissed. The argument dissolved into something else entirely, the way their arguments often did when neither was willing to prioritize being right over being together. We're terrible at fighting, Halifa said when they broke apart. We're excellent at fighting. We're just also excellent at resolving fights through honest communication and physical affection. Is that what we're calling it? Physical affection? Would you prefer tactical reconciliation? She laughed. I love you. Even when you're infuriating and make unilateral decisions about Indonesian expansion. I love you too. Even when you're controlling and want to be consulted about everything. The challenge came 6 months into their relationship when everything they'd built was threatened by forces neither had anticipated. A coalition of criminal organizations, resentful of the power Halifa and Jae-ho had accumulated through their partnership, decided to move against them simultaneously. The Yakuza targeted Jae-ho's operations in Japan. The Russian mob hit Halifa's intelligence sources in Eastern Europe. The Mexican cartels launched attacks on their shared interests in South America. It was coordinated, sophisticated, designed to overwhelm them by forcing them to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. This is Marcus Chen's work, Halifa said, reviewing intelligence about the attacks. The coordination, the timing, it has his signature all over it. But you have a partnership agreement with him. He swore not to move against you. He swore not to move against me directly. Organizing others to attack while maintaining plausible deniability is different. She pulled up financial records. And I found payments from his organization to at least 3 of the groups attacking us. He's financing this coalition. Then we eliminate him. We can't just kill him. That triggers a war with Sun Yan. We need to outmaneuver him, make the coalition collapse before it destroys us. How? By doing what I do best. Information warfare. Khalifa pulled up files on every organization in the coalition. I've been collecting intelligence on all of them for years. I know their secrets, their vulnerabilities, their internal conflicts. We're going to systematically destroy the coalition by turning them against each other. Over the next 3 weeks, Khalifa orchestrated the most sophisticated information warfare campaign of her career. She leaked to the Yakuza that the Russians were planning to betray them. Showed the Mexicans evidence that the Yakuza were trying to eliminate them from South American markets. Revealed to all of them that Marcus Chen was embezzling from the coalition's shared funds. Within 2 weeks, the coalition was fighting internally more than they were fighting Khalifa and Jeho. Within 3 weeks, they'd completely collapsed, with the Yakuza and Russians actually going to war with each other. Marcus Chen found himself exposed, disgraced, and facing execution from his own organization for the embezzlement that Khalifa had leaked. He called her from hiding, his voice desperate. You destroyed me. Everything I built, everything I was, gone because you leaked information. You organized a coalition to destroy me and Jeho. This is the consequence. You violated our agreement, so I used the leverage I'd been holding to eliminate you as a threat. Khalifa's voice was cold. Did you think I wouldn't have contingency plans? Did you think blackmail material loses effectiveness just because you smile and pretend to be partners? I thought you were too ethical to use it this ruthlessly. You confused ethical with soft. I'm ethical about keeping my word to people who keep their word to me. You violated our agreement. This is exactly what I promised would happen. So what now? You've won. You've destroyed me. Going to have me killed to complete your victory? No. Because you're more valuable alive. Khalifa paused. You're going to work for me. Use your intelligence skills to serve my network. You'll be protected from Sun Yi-on's execution order, you'll have resources to rebuild your life, but you'll be my subordinate instead of my competitor. That's worse than death for someone like me. Then choose death. But understand that working for me is the only option that lets you survive with any power at all. Subordinate is better than dead. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I'll work for you. But I want guarantees. Protection, resources, a path to eventually regaining independent operation. You'll have protection and resources. Independence you'll earn back over years of proving you can be trusted. Or you won't, and you'll spend the rest of your career working for me. Those are the terms. He agreed. Because survival mattered more than pride, and Khalifa's terms were the only path to survival available. By the end of month 7, Khalifa and Jeho had not only survived the coordinated attack but emerged stronger. The coalition had collapsed, their enemies were fighting each other, and they'd added Marcus Chen's considerable intelligence capabilities to their organization. You're terrifying, Jeho said as they reviewed the aftermath. You turned a coordinated attack by multiple powerful organizations into an opportunity to expand your network and consolidate power. I'm practical. Enemies who can be converted are more valuable than enemies who are destroyed. Marcus is brilliant, he'll be useful if we can actually trust him eventually. And if we can't? Then we eliminate him when he becomes a threat again. But I'm betting he's learned his lesson about trying to destroy me. They were in Khalifa's Singapore office, overlooking the city, reviewing months of work that had transformed 2 separate criminal empires into something larger and more sophisticated. I have a proposal, Jeho said. Personal or professional? Both. He turned to face her. Marry me. Not for business reasons, not for alliance purposes. Because I love you and I want to spend my life building this empire with you. Because you're the most brilliant person I've ever met and the only partner I've ever truly respected. Because. He pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Khalifa looked at the ring, at Jeho, at the empire they'd built together. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. No romance, no build-up, just marry me because I love you like you're negotiating a business contract. Would you prefer romantic speeches and dramatic gestures? No. I prefer honest, direct, exactly what you just said. She took the ring, examined it. But I have conditions. Of course you do. We're equal partners in everything. Business and personal. No one has authority over the other. We consult, we collaborate, we argue when we disagree, but we always decide together. And if we ever have to choose between the relationship and the empire, we choose the relationship. Power isn't worth having if we lose each other to get it. Agreed. Anything else? Yeah. Ask me properly. On one knee, like you did at the Macau summit. Call me queen again. Jae-ho smiled, dropped to one knee, held out the ring. My queen. Will you marry me and help me rule an empire that's only powerful because we built it together? Yes. But only if you promise to keep arguing with me when I'm wrong and keep respecting me when I'm right. I promise. As long as you promise to keep challenging me to be better and keep loving me even when I'm stubborn and controlling. Deal. He put the ring on her finger. They kissed. And in a Singapore office overlooking a city that had no idea the building contained two people who controlled criminal enterprises spanning 3 continents, Halifa Reynolds and Jae-ho Shik started planning a future that was equal parts empire building and actual partnership. We should probably have a wedding, Halifa said. Probably. Though I have no idea how criminals plan weddings. Neither do I. Should we invite our enemies? Definitely. Strategic alliance opportunities and the chance to make them jealous of our success. This is going to be the weirdest wedding in criminal history. I wouldn't expect anything else from us. They married 3 months later in a ceremony that was equal parts criminal summit and actual wedding. The guest list included the heads of every major Asian criminal organization, representatives from European and American crime families, legitimate business people who had no idea they were attending a mob wedding, and a handful of people who genuinely cared about Halifa and Jae-ho as people rather than as power brokers. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Held in a private estate outside Hong Kong, combining Korean and American traditions, officiated by a judge who was definitely on several crime families' payrolls but who delivered genuinely moving words about partnership and commitment. When Jae-ho and Halifa exchanged vows, they wrote their own. Jae-ho, I promise to respect your intelligence even when it challenges mine. To consult you before major decisions even when I think I know best. To protect you without controlling you. To build our empire together instead of separately. And to love you more than power, more than money, more than anything except our partnership. Halifa, I promise to trust your judgment even when it scares me. To share my intelligence without using it as a weapon against you. To let you protect me without surrendering my independence. To build our future together instead of alone. And to choose you over empire if that choice ever becomes necessary. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even hardened criminals who'd killed people were moved by the obvious genuine love between two people who'd built something real in a world defined by violence and betrayal. The reception was where things got interesting. Criminal organizations used the wedding as an opportunity to negotiate deals, settle disputes, and establish new alliances. Halifa and Jae-ho's wedding became an impromptu criminal summit where more business was conducted than at most formal meetings. Dmitry Volkov, the Russian mobster who'd thrown a drink at Halifa at the Macau summit, approached them during the reception. I want to apologize properly, he said, clearly nervous. Not just for that night, but for every time I've disrespected you or underestimated you because of how you looked. You've proven you're one of the most formidable people in our world. I'd like to establish a formal partnership if you're willing. Apology accepted. Partnership possible if you can prove you've actually changed your attitudes and aren't just performing respect because I have power now. Halifa's voice was measured. Prove you've become less of an asshole over the next year, and we'll discuss business. Fair. Thank you for the opportunity. Marcus Chan approached next, looking healthier than when he'd been fleeing execution, clearly benefiting from working for Halifa's network instead of competing against it. Congratulations, he said sincerely. What you've built, both the empire and the relationship, is remarkable. Thank you for giving me a chance to be part of it instead of destroying me completely. You're welcome. And Marcus? You've been doing excellent work for the network. Keep it up and we'll discuss independent operations next year. Really? Really? You've proven you can be trusted. That earns opportunities. The wedding celebration lasted until dawn. By the time it ended, Halifa and Jeho had consolidated dozens of new alliances, settled several territorial disputes, and established themselves as not just individual power brokers but as a united force that would define the Asian criminal underworld for years to come. When they finally escaped to their honeymoon, a private island in the Philippines, secured by Jeho's vast security team, completely off-grid, they collapsed into each other with relief. "We survived our own wedding," Halifa said, laughing. "That's an accomplishment. We turned our wedding into a criminal summit. That's very us. We're terrible at separating personal and professional. We're excellent at integrating them. There's a difference." Jeho pulled her closer. "I love you, Mrs. Schick. I love you too. And I'm keeping my last name, Mr. Reynolds. We're not taking each other's names? We're both too stubborn and our names are both too tied to our organizations. Better to keep them separate. Fair. Though our children are going to have complicated last name decisions." Halifa went still. "Children? We haven't discussed children. We haven't discussed a lot of things we probably should. Like whether we want children, where we'll live, how we balance running criminal empires with having an actual life together. We're terrible at planning the personal stuff. Then let's plan it now. Honeymoon is for exactly this kind of conversation." They spent the next week actually talking about their future, not just business strategy and empire building, but real life. Whether they wanted children, yes, eventually, though the logistics of raising kids while running criminal organizations were complicated. Where they'd live, splitting time between Singapore, Seoul, and whatever other cities their operations required. How they'd balance the danger of their lives with the desire for something approaching normalcy. "I want to build something that lasts beyond us," Halifa said during one of these conversations. "Not just a criminal empire that collapses when we die, but actual legacy. Legal businesses, legitimate influence, something that makes the world better instead of just extracting profit from it." "You want to go legitimate?" "Eventually. Not immediately, but yes. Use the power and money we've built criminally to create something that actually helps people. Philanthropy, business development, education initiatives. Turn blood money into clean legacy. That's ambitious. Also difficult. Transitioning from criminal to legitimate isn't easy. Neither was building an intelligence empire from nothing while pretending to be a maid. I'm comfortable with difficult." Jeho smiled. "Then we'll do it. Build the empire first, transition to legitimate later, leave something behind that matters more than the crimes we committed to create it." "You're agreeing to this very easily." "Because I've been thinking the same thing. My father built this empire through violence. I expanded it through strategy. But I want my children, our children, to inherit something they can be proud of instead of something they have to hide." Then we're aligned. Criminal empire now, legitimate legacy eventually. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we rule our empire together and enjoy being married to the most brilliant, infuriating person we've ever met. I can do that. They spent 2 weeks on the island before returning to the complicated reality of running criminal organizations across multiple continents while trying to maintain an actual marriage. It wasn't easy. They fought constantly about operational decisions, about risk tolerance, about how to balance Halifa's intelligence-gathering methods with Jeho's security concerns. They struggled with time zone differences, with travel schedules that kept them apart for weeks, with the constant danger that came with being powerful in a world where power attracted violence. But they also built something extraordinary together. Over the next 3 years, they expanded their combined empire to control intelligence operations across 4 continents. They established legitimate businesses that laundered criminal profits while actually providing value. Technology companies, real estate developments, security consulting firms. They began the slow transition toward legitimate power that would eventually let them leave the criminal world behind. And they had twins, a boy and a girl, born in a private hospital in Singapore, with security that would have been appropriate for heads of state. We have children, Jae-ho said, holding his daughter while Halifa held their son, both of them looking terrified and amazed in equal measure. We have children who will inherit a criminal empire and hopefully a legitimate legacy. That's complicated. Everything about us is complicated. But we make it work. Do we? Or are we just really good at managing chaos? Both. And that's okay. They raised their children with the same pragmatic honesty they brought to everything else. The kids knew their parents ran complicated business operations that weren't entirely legal. They had security details, lived in safe houses, understood that their family was different from others. But they also had love. Real love, not the performative kind. Parents who were honest with them, who taught them ethics even while running criminal organizations, who wanted them to become better than their parents had been. I want them to have choices we didn't have, Halifa said when the twins were 3 years old. Want them to be able to choose legitimate paths if they want, not feel obligated to continue criminal operations. Agreed. Which means we need to accelerate our transition to legitimate business. Give them something clean to inherit instead of something criminal. You're really ready to leave the underworld behind? I'm ready to build something our children can be proud of instead of something they have to hide. You? I've been ready since the Macau summit when you knelt and called me queen. That's when I realized I wanted to build something larger than just criminal power. Over the next 2 years, they systematically transitioned their operations from criminal to legitimate. Sold off illegal enterprises, invested in legal businesses, used their intelligence networks to create legitimate consulting operations that served governments and corporations. By the time their children started school, Halifa and Jae-ho were running one of Asia's most successful business consulting and security firms, completely legal, highly profitable, built on the intelligence and strategic thinking they'd developed in the criminal underworld but applied to legitimate purposes. They'd successfully transformed from criminals to legitimate power brokers without losing the empire they'd built. We did it, Halifa said during a quiet evening at their Singapore home, watching their children play in the garden while security teams maintained protective perimeters that were now protecting a legitimate family instead of a criminal enterprise. We built something that will last beyond us. Something our children can inherit with pride instead of shame. Something real. Not just power or money, but actual legacy. Jae-ho pulled her close. I love you. Thank you for saving my life, for building this empire with me, for giving me children and a future that matters more than crime. I love you too. Thank you for kneeling when you could have ignored me, for being my partner when you could have been my competitor, for choosing to build something meaningful instead of just accumulating power. They watched their children play, watched the sun set over Singapore, watched the future they'd created through intelligence and violence and strategic thinking unfold into something genuinely good. The invisible maid had become a queen. The criminal boss had become a legitimate business leader. Together, they'd proven that transformation was possible, that people could become better than what circumstances demanded, that love and partnership could create something extraordinary even in the most unlikely circumstances. 10 years after the Macau summit where everyone had laughed at the black maid who turned out to be the most powerful person in the room, Halifa Reynolds and Jae-ho Shik stood on a stage accepting a philanthropic award for their foundation's work providing education and opportunity to underserved communities. The audience applauded. No one there knew that the respectable business leaders on stage had once been the Queen and the Ghost, 2 of the most dangerous criminals in Asia. No one knew that the intelligence empire that now served legitimate purposes had been built through blackmail and information warfare. No one knew that the couple accepting awards for helping people had once destroyed their enemies without mercy. And that was fine. Because the people they'd been had created the people they'd become. The criminal empire had funded the legitimate legacy. The violence had been transformed into something constructive. They'd proven that who you are isn't who you have to remain forever. That transformation is possible. That building something meaningful sometimes requires starting from darkness and deliberately choosing light. After the ceremony, they returned home to their children, to the life they'd built, to the future that looked nothing like the past they'd survived. Do you ever miss it? Their daughter asked that evening. The excitement of running criminal operations? Sometimes, Halifa admitted. But I prefer this. Building things instead of destroying them. Creating opportunities instead of eliminating threats. Your mother and I did what we had to do to survive and build power, Jae-ho added. But we chose to use that power to create something better. That choice matters more than where we started. Will you teach us? Their son asked. The intelligence gathering, the strategic thinking, how you built everything. Yes. But we'll teach you to use it for legitimate purposes. To build businesses and help people instead of running criminal operations. Promise? Promise. You get to become better than we were. That's the whole point of what we built. That night, after the children were asleep, Halifa and Jae-ho stood on their balcony overlooking Singapore skyline. We really did it, Halifa said. Built an empire, transformed it into something legitimate, gave our children a future we never had. We did. And it was only possible because you were brilliant enough to see opportunities others missed and I was stubborn enough to build on them. We're a good team. The best team. My queen. Your partner. That's better than queen. Agreed. My partner. My love. The person who turned my life into something worth living. They kissed. And in that moment, overlooking a city they'd once controlled through criminal power and now influenced through legitimate means, two people who'd survived impossible circumstances and built something extraordinary celebrated the life they'd created together. The maid who became queen. The criminal who became legitimate. The partnership that transformed darkness into light. That was the real empire. Not the money or the power or the influence. Just two people who'd chosen each other, chosen to build something meaningful, and refused to let their circumstances define their future. That was the legacy worth leaving behind. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you don't notice. The ones serving drinks, cleaning rooms, existing in spaces where powerful people forget to guard their words because they assume service workers are invisible. Halifa Reynolds spent years being underestimated, dismissed, mocked. All while building an intelligence empire that made her one of the most powerful people in the criminal underworld. She turned invisibility into advantage, used people's prejudices against them, proved that power doesn't require visibility or conventional dominance. Jae-ho Shik recognized her when everyone else saw only a maid. He knelt before her, called her queen, and built a partnership that transformed both their empires into something larger than either could have created alone. Together, they proved that real power comes from intelligence, from strategic thinking, from being willing to do the difficult work of building instead of just taking. They demonstrated that transformation is possible, from criminal to legitimate, from darkness to light, from survival to legacy. Most importantly, they showed that who you are isn't determined by how people see you or what circumstances you were born into. It's determined by what you build, who you become, and whether you choose to use your power for something meaningful. If you love this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about unlikely partnerships and the transformative power of refusing to accept other people's limitations on who you can become. Comment below, have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked or what job you had? How did you prove them wrong? Let me know, I love hearing your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most dangerous people are often the ones you don't see coming. Never underestimate someone based on appearance, occupation, or social position. Power takes many forms, and the quietest person in the room might be the one controlling everything. Until next time.